Hello and welcome to Health Matters. Thanks for joining us. I am Mary Alale Yusuf. Experts keep sounding it out that breastfeeding is one of the most effective ways to ensure child health and survival. According to the World Health Organization, around the world, only 40% of infants under 6 months are exclusively breastfed. It predicts that if all children between 0 to 23 months were optimally breastfed, about 820,000 children would be saved from death every single year. The WHO even goes as far as to say that breastfeeding is associated with higher income in adult life. Furthermore, few children receive nutritionally adequate and safe complementary foods. In many countries, less than a fourth of infants 6 to 23 months of age meet the criteria of dietary diversity and feeding frequency that are appropriate for their age. Globally, in 2022, 149 million children under 5 were estimated to be too short for their age or too thin for their height, and 37 million were overweight or obese. My guest is consultant family physician and vice president of Medical Initiative, Dr. Agbo Ebuta. He joins us online from Abuja. So, doctor, we've heard about exclusive breastfeeding for some time now. Tell us, what are the special benefits of breast milk?
The breast milk, the human breast milk, is basically factory fitted, super customized, with excellent components, millions of different components that are specific for the human baby. It is critical that within the first 6 months that we get the message out there that exclusive breastfeeding is more than sufficient to take care of all the nutritional requirements of the baby. So, of course, the first and the most important benefit is that this form of breastfeeding approach provides everything that the child needs. Of course, the only exception would be in situations where a child has diarrhea and you probably want to do ORS or you want to do supplements in certain conditions where you give medications and the rest. But outside that, it provides the complete nutritional requirement for a child in the first 6 months. In addition to that, the benefits that accrue from this are numerous. They are too numerous to mention. For the baby, for example, it reduces the frequency of illnesses within the first 6 months. We know, for example, that it cuts down respiratory infections, basic upper respiratory tract infections, and even pneumonia by a significant percentage. It also reduces the risk of ear infections in children. It completely reduces the risk of diarrhea in children to a large extent, cuts down the frequency and prevalence of allergic reactions in children, either in the underage, in the under 5, or later in life, cuts down the risk of obesity and the attendant risk of diabetes in this population. Also, in children, it increases their intelligence quotient. It has been shown that children who are breastfed score averagely higher scores in the same test when exposed to those tests and compared with children who are not breastfed. So these are just a few of the benefits for the child. But for the mother, there are also benefits. The mother also is protected from certain forms of cancers like breast cancers, ovarian cancers, uterine cancers. Breastfeeding exclusively also facilitates the loss of pregnancy weight, or weight that is acquired during the course of pregnancy, and helps the woman to attain her previous aesthetic figure prior to pregnancy. In addition to that, it improves bonding between the mother and the child. When the child is always with the mother and is being breastfed, it increases bonding, which has several implications. It has implications for the psychological and mental health of the child, also has the same for the psychological and mental health of the mother. For the father and for the family, it provides numerous benefits. I will just probably do a small calculation so that we can understand. A child probably needs an estimated 42 tins of milk formula. So if you decide you don't want to give a child exclusive breast milk, you would have to find a way to provide 42 tins of formula. Formula ranges between 6,000 naira to 22,000 naira, depending on the brand. And if you do the maths, we are talking of 256,000 naira to as much as 924,000 naira if you are buying the brands that are locally available for you to feed a child in the first 6 months. That amount of money, how many Nigerians can afford to pay for that? So you can see the affordability for the family is significant. This affordability is also associated with a sustainability for the family. You do not
Let me
have
quickly
to
take
worry
you up.
about what to feed the child.
Let me quickly take you up on some of these diseases.
Yes.
Yes. Do experts have an answer for mothers who might have HIV or hepatitis B? Is there something to stop those diseases passing to the child from the breast milk so that they also can breastfeed their children?
Yes, indeed. Well, the current position is that even mothers that are HIV positive can breastfeed their children, but there are certain provisos. These mothers should be on a highly active antiretroviral therapy. And if they're on highly active antiretroviral therapy and the therapy is working for them, they will achieve a clinical status that is called viral suppression. This is when less than 20 viruses are detectable per ml of blood. At that viral level, the chances of transmission to the child is absolutely reduced. In addition to that, we have a program called the Prevention of Mother-to-Child Transmission. It's a comprehensive program, but I'll just pick on one or two aspects. Another aspect is that the child has to be put on a single-dose antiretroviral therapy, things like nevirapine and a few other medications. Now, these medications within the first 6 weeks reduces the risk of transmission to a child that is exposed, that is born by a mother who is HIV positive, but the child is not affected, and the use of those medications during the first 6 weeks, and then subsequently based on the plan for breastfeeding and all of that. So we do have programs in place that allows HIV positive women to breastfeed their children, provided they follow the rules, they take their medications, there's viral suppression, and the child is also on antiretroviral therapy for the period to reduce the risk of transmission. We call that pre-exposure transmission. Of course, in HIV/AIDS scenario, it is even very important that those children are exclusively breastfed, because children who are being breastfed by HIV positive mothers and who are not being exclusively breastfed have higher rates of infections with diarrheal diseases, inflammation of their intestine, and this combined increases the risk of the acquisition of HIV/AIDS from their mothers in that scenario. So it's very important to understand that. As in respect to hepatitis B, to a large extent, there are also programs to prevent transmission to children of mothers who are hepatitis B positive. There's a program which involves the introduction of the immunoglobulin. That is a medication that is injected into the child, and that cuts down the risk of exposure, even if the mother decides to breastfeed. So there's no limitation to breastfeeding. In addition to the use of the immunoglobulin, of course, the basic vaccination with hepatitis B vaccination has an excellent potential to stimulate autoimmunity in the child that protects the child from being infected. So with the current technology and knowledge that we have, we do know that there are basically no restrictions to that, provided that knowledge is transmitted into action and the mothers and the caregivers comply with guidelines.
You mentioned the possibility of a breastfed child having a higher income later in life. What's the correlation between the breast milk and a child getting a higher income much later in his life?
Well, there is evidence to show that children who are breastfed have higher cognitive ability. That is, they have a higher intelligence quotient. If you have a higher intelligence quotient, you are more likely to achieve higher educational level in terms of advancement. The higher you go in your educational career, the higher the chances of you landing a job with better opportunities. So you cannot compare someone who did not finish secondary school with someone who has finished university or even have a master's. And of course, when they get into the job market, their returns, their salaries are going to be higher. So the chance, it's already there. In fact, it is set or cast in stone already. Of course, we do have exceptions of people who did not go to school and who went into business and all of that. But that argument can also be applied. If you decide to go into business and you do not have any ideas about mathematics due to a preset reduction in cognition due to poor diet, especially in your earlier years, is also going to affect your efficiency in the marketplace. So, but to cut the long story short, patients or people or children who are breastfed are more likely to have a higher intelligence quotient, better opportunities in school, likely to score higher grades and achieve higher educational level in terms of how they finish up, and therefore their exposure and opportunities in the job market will be higher. This will translate to higher incomes.
Okay, so the advice is 6 months of breastfeeding, exclusive breastfeeding, and then breastfeeding even up until 2 years. What is it about a child's first 2 years that makes it so important to breastfeed the child?
Well, the first 2 years is not exactly synonymous with the first 10 days of a child's life, but they are usually classified around. During this period, infant mortality, neonatal mortality, and under 5 mortality are usually at the highest. They are usually the highest levels. Presently speaking, in Nigeria, the neonatal mortality, that is the chances of a child dying within the first 30 days of life, is put at around 34. The chances of a child dying within the first 5 years of life is put at around 117 per 1,000 live births. That tells you that the risk of dying is high in the underage. Because the risk of dying is high in the underage, you need to take steps to mitigate this. And when you put that out, counterpose that against the fact that a child who is breastfed is 14 times, and I repeat, 14 times less likely to die. How many health interventions do we have in place? How many medications do we have in place? How many health programs or health system intervention do we have in place that reduces the chances of death by 14? I can only name a few. So it tells you that the technology itself, breastfeeding technology, proper application, can significantly reduce death within the first 2 years of life, within the first 1 month of life, and as the case may be. And for breastfeeding children, as I said, it reduces the chances of dying as much as 14 times. It cuts down diarrhea. It cuts down respiratory infections, pneumonia, and these are the causes of death in underage children. What happens with breastfeeding is that within the first 6 months of life, provided a child is breastfed, that child gets what you call natural immunization. Within the breast milk, you have cells, leukocytes, white blood cells. These are cells that actively fight infections. You have chemicals that we call them immunoglobulins. These are chemicals that deliberately knock out bacteria in the intestine and in the respiratory tract of children. So it tells you that, look, because the immunity of children has not been built up, because once you are delivered, your immunity is not as high as people who are much older. But as you are exposed to infections, you are exposed to certain stimulants or even vaccination, your immunity builds up. Within the first 2 years, you are most vulnerable. Your immunity is as low as it gets because your immunity has not been stimulated by bacteria, viruses, and as the case may be. So what breast milk does is that it provides you with a form of immunization from the mother to the child that protects the child within those first months of life, reducing the risk of infection. In fact, we've demonstrated several times that once a child stops breastfeeding or getting exclusive breastfeeding, the chances of even malaria increases in that child. That, to a large extent, increases the risk of dying because we know malaria is one of the significant contributing factors to under 5 mortality.
So would you say, with all these arguments for, how good breastfeeding is, in the last 20 years, has it improved in Nigeria? Are you satisfied with the number of women who are breastfeeding their children in the country now?
I would say I am not satisfied. And the numbers are there for us to speak about. Generally speaking, Nigeria is a high breastfeeding country because as much as 90% of our mothers acquiesce to the fact that they have breastfed their children. But that's not what we are talking about. What we are talking about is exclusive breastfeeding. And when you narrow it into exclusive breastfeeding, it's just about 26-29% of our mothers confirm that they practice exclusive breastfeeding. That leaves out as much as 70% not practicing exclusive breastfeeding. And when you counterpose that with a population of 230 million Nigerians and with a birth rate fluctuating between 2 to 3%, that tells you the number of children that are exposed to illness. I can tell you for free that a lot of the children who account for the under 5 mortality in Nigeria, the neonatal mortality in Nigeria, more than 70% of them belong to the category that did not enjoy exclusive breastfeeding. What exclusive breastfeeding does for a family is that it takes that child out of the health pool in terms of the health pool of people with diseases, of children with diseases. A child who is exclusively breastfed may not even visit the hospital except for immunization within the first 6 months of life. And this is a fact that is documented. The impact of that on the health system is significant. So even talking about exclusive breastfeeding, apart from the benefit for the child, the benefit for the mother, the benefit for the father's pocket, if he is the main, of course, as a breadwinner of the house in some situations, there's benefit for the economy, there's benefit for the community, there's benefit for the nation. If we exclusively breastfeed, we know what it does. It will cut down the importation of even a formula. It will cut down the demand on formula, which will save us foreign exchange. With over how many million Nigerian children born every year, if you put all of them on exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months, it will save us forex. And I think the CBN governor should also be interested in matters like this. Apart from that, fewer patients presenting in the neonatal and the pediatric unit in the hospital will reduce the pressure on those hospitals. It will free up doctors and nurses and other health workers' time to attend to other patients that need more attention. So, to a large extent, we cannot finish discussing the benefits of exclusive breastfeeding. That is why we must be very deliberate about going about promoting it more actively so that we can jump those numbers from 29% exclusive breastfeeding as currently estimated in Nigeria to as close as possible to 100%.
So talk to us about the state of the mother. I'm guessing that a poorly fed mother makes for a poorly fed child.
Fantastic. That is an absolute challenge. But a mother who is malnourished would impact on the quality of the breast milk. But it will surprise you to know that the breast milk, the way the biology is and the biophysiology is, the breast milk takes priority. So even in a malnourished mother, the breast milk will still be of better quality than expected. The breast milk, the breast infrastructure has a way of pulling out all the nutrients and resources. So a malnourished mother who is breastfeeding a child is far better than a nourished mother who is not breastfeeding the child. However, it is important that when we look at nutrition of children, we must also look at the nutrition of the
Okay,
mother.
so I'm going to have to pause you there. We have to go on a break right now. Please stay with us and we'll come back on. You'll see us on the other side.
All right.
Welcome back. You're watching Health Matters and we're talking about breastfeeding. And let's go on to the conversation. So, doctor, experts keep saying feed the child on demand. Can you explain what on demand might entail?
Okay, well, the easiest way to say that is that feed the child every time the child acts as if the child is hungry, every time the child makes effort to breastfeed. It means basically putting the child to breast as often as you should. So when you start breastfeeding a child, there's usually the foremilk, which is made up of nutrients, carbohydrate, protein. And then after you feed for a few minutes, there's a hind milk, which is made up of mostly fat. Both of these milk are basically complementary. So, but if you are able to feed a child sufficiently on the breast, the child would probably have 2 to 3 hours of good sleep. And to ensure that the child at any point in time enjoys significant rest, is adequately breastfed, gets the right nutrition, and therefore will grow properly. So feeding on demand means that the child's cry for food is not postponed. You don't give the child a pacifier, for example, to just soothe the child. If the child is crying and needs to be soothed with food, you put the child immediately to breast. It's also important to, at this point, highlight that feeding the child on demand is actually one of 10 components of what you call the baby hospital-friendly initiative, which is an initiative to promote and encourage and establish breastfeeding as a critical component of caring for children. And of course, there are up to 9 other components, things like every hospital or healthcare facility or healthcare outpost should have a written breastfeeding policy. This policy should be communicated to all members of staff. Members of staff should be trained on how to apply this policy, the skill required to apply this policy. The contents on the message of this policy should be communicated to women who are pregnant, and when they deliver within 1 hour, breastfeeding should be established, and mothers should be trained on how to contain and sustain breastfeeding, and mothers should be, of course, practice rooming in, where they spend as much time with their child and they can now feed on demand and avoid the use of pacifiers. And of course, finally, link mothers to breast support in the community so that even when they leave the hospital care and health workers care and they go back to the community, they are able to sustain breastfeeding and deal with the challenges that are likely going to come up to reduce their capacity to continue to breastfeed.
But do you ever have any medical reason for giving a child water, for example, within the first 6 months? Medical reason, because we are told that exclusive breastfeeding means no water, no additives. Are there some women who have to give their child water or some other thing for some medical reason?
Well, breast milk has 87.5% water. It is more than enough water for a child. And for a child that is not having issues like diarrhea, where they are losing more than the usual fluid from their body, there is no indication. In fact, most children would do well without water, and they do not need water. Occasionally, there is that cultural belief that you have to give this child water, and it's common. In Nigeria, you have families where they insist they must give their child water. In fact, you even have families in certain parts of Nigeria that believe that you must give their child a little shot of ogogoro And you have families in other parts of Nigeria that believe that you must give the child a concoction. But I put it to you that in the first 6 months of life, the child has enough water in the breast milk and needs no additional water. And except in a child that is losing fluid in the form of diarrhea, that is when an oral rehydration solution properly constituted, hygienically constituted, and delivered to the child becomes an indication.
You've put forth a very strong argument for exclusive breastfeeding in the first 6 months. But let me ask you finally, what do you think we can do to convince mothers in Nigeria that this is really the way to go?
I think it will require an interdisciplinary, inter-stakeholder, multifaceted intervention. The mothers have a role, the family has a role, the health worker has a role, the community has a role, and the government has a role. For the mothers, well, when they get to the hospital facility, we need to start, or for the mothers, it's been shown that mothers who are highly educated, for example, have a better chance of accepting and understanding the implications of breast milk for impact for their children. They are also less likely to adopt harmful, old, archaic cultural practices like taking water, giving additional water, giving concoctions and all the rest that we have mentioned, and throwing away the first breast milk, which is called colostrum, which is the most important immunization a child will get in the first 24 hours. So education is very important for the mothers. And then for the health facilities, healthcare staff must be trained in the WHO baby-friendly hospital initiative in the application of this, because this has been shown to be super potent. In the community, we must engage the community gatekeepers, the stakeholders, the traditional rulers, the religious rulers, the market women. These people are gatekeepers. These people are influence peddlers. These are people that if you are able to adjust certain beliefs, cultural beliefs that are not in favor of sustained breastfeeding, you can completely remove this significantly. At the level of the government should recognize that one of the greatest intervention in terms of healthcare is prevention. And exclusive breastfeeding has been shown to prevent and cut down on all forms of diseases spread throughout the life of the child. And it is the best, and as such, if the government desires to significantly cut the cost of healthcare, the budgetary allocations to healthcare, government would need to increase knowledge, come out with massive health education, and support state programs, put in place systems that ensure that mothers who want to breastfeed, who want to breastfeed, are supported at all points in time. We do have technology, and I do not see why we cannot have every breastfeeding mother on an app or a form of communication, so that they are reminded and they are given information to support them through the journey of breastfeeding. And whenever they have challenges, they can send back they can send back their challenges, and it will be resolved using the best evidence-based, scientifically proven.
Thanks for that 10-point expose that you gave us. And I think it's on this note that it is a good time to call an end to the program. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Dr. Agbo Ebuta.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here.
And thank you, viewers at home and everywhere you are on your laptop, TV, or system, wherever, for tuning into the program. Have a wonderful day. I am Mary Alale Yusuf.